A beautiful and confident young black woman who just wanted to buy some personal items became the target of an arrogant white police officer. Her sharp words angered him, leading to actions that spiraled out of control. But what the police officer didn't know, she was not just a victim, she was the mayor's daughter, and things had just begun. If you like this content, don't forget to like, share this story with your friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. The morning was crisp, the gentle sunlight streaming through the glass windows of a modest little supermarket on a quiet street. The atmosphere inside the supermarket was cozy, with a few customers leisurely choosing items. Alyssa Carter walked in, wearing a bright red coat that highlighted her shiny blonde hair. With her big bright eyes and smooth skin, she attracted the attention of everyone around her. Today, Alyssa only planned to buy a few personal items and leave quickly. She walked down the aisles, her hands lightly brushing the shelves. When she picked out a bottle of lotion, she smiled with satisfaction and continued searching for what she needed. But that simple joy was quickly shattered. The glass door of the supermarket swung open and a bell rang to signal someone entering. A middle-aged man, dressed in a police uniform, walked in with an arrogant air. He was Charles Baker, a police officer known for his disdain for others, especially those of a different skin color. Charles's gaze swept across the supermarket, quickly stopping at Alyssa. His sharp blue eyes flashed with curiosity. He smirked, adjusted the gun on his belt and walked closer to her. "Well, today is a lucky day," Charles said loudly, causing several people in the supermarket to turn and look. Alyssa frowned slightly but tried to ignore it and continued choosing clothes. Charles was not to be missed. He stood right next to her, leaning against the shelf and said, "You are beautiful. That hair, that red dress. You remind me of those dolls in the fashion stores." Alyssa turned around, her eyes cold. "I'm busy. If you have nothing to do, please move out of the way." Charles laughed loudly, a mocking laugh. "Oh, you have a fierce attitude. You know, someone like you shouldn't act so unapproachable. I was just complimenting you." Alyssa looked straight into his eyes. "Praise or harassment, you know. Either way, I don't care. Stop bothering me." Alyssa's sharp words left Charles stunned for a moment, but the confusion quickly turned to anger. Charles chuckled, took a step back, then suddenly changed his tone, flirtatious and sarcastic. "Who do you think you are? A Hollywood star? Don't get too cocky, girl. With that skin tone, you should just feel lucky that I even noticed you." Alyssa stood straight, her gaze unwavering. "I don't need your attention. In fact, I'm sick of your arrogant attitude." Her reply was like a punch to Charles's pride. He lowered his voice, but every word was sarcastic and bitter. "Listen, blonde. Do you think that dyed hair can hide your origins? Don't think that a red shirt and expensive shoes can set you apart. To me, you're still just a lowly person." Those words made the supermarket space fall silent. A few customers standing nearby began to whisper, their eyes filled with worry and indignation. Alyssa took a deep breath, suppressing her anger. She took a step toward Charles, her eyes blazing with power. "Do you think you have the right to say things like that just because you're wearing a police uniform? The uniform doesn't make you a good person. It just makes you an abuser of power." Charles smirked, trying to keep his cool, but clearly he was being driven out of control by Alyssa. "Don't think you can raise your voice at me," Charles said, his voice starting to lose its composure. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Alyssa crossed her arms over her chest, keeping her gaze steady. "So tell me, who am I dealing with? A coward hiding in a police uniform to bully women?" The words were like a sharp knife stabbing straight into Charles's pride. His face was red, his hand gripping the gun at his side tightly. "If you don't want to get in trouble, you better apologize now," Charles hissed. "Sorry? No way!" Alyssa replied, her voice calm but defiant. Charles was so angry that he couldn't control himself. He pulled the gun out of its holster and raised it threateningly. "You think you're so smart. One more step and I'll make you regret it." The whole supermarket was shocked. A few customers screamed and backed away. The supermarket staff stood still, not daring to move. Alyssa, on the other hand, remained surprisingly calm. She did not take a single step back. Her eyes stared straight at Charles, unafraid. "You just made a big mistake," she said, taking out her phone and calmly dialing a number. Charles raised an eyebrow, stepping back slightly. "What are you going to do?" Alyssa didn't answer. She put the phone to her ear and waited. In the large office of City Hall, Mayor James Carter was finishing up his last few minutes before lunch. He was a dignified, middle-aged man, always calm and collected in any situation. The phone on his desk rang. He looked at the screen and saw his daughter Alyssa's name flashing up. "A call from Alyssa at this hour," James wondered, feeling a little strange. When he picked up, his daughter's familiar voice rang out, but this time it was mixed with a rare seriousness. "Dad, I'm at the mall on Main Street. A cop is harassing me. He just pulled a gun on me in front of everyone," Alyssa said, her voice clear but firm. James immediately stood up. "What? A policeman dares to do that to me? Are you okay? Is anyone hurt?" "I'm fine, but he's still standing here. You need to come here now and do something before things get worse." The mayor didn't need to hear more. He hung up and immediately pressed the button on his desk to call his assistant. "Get the sheriff here, now," James ordered, his voice booming like a storm. The assistant quickly complied, and within minutes, Sheriff Robert King, a tall man with a stern appearance, entered the office. "What is it, sir?" Robert asked, noticing the urgency in James's eyes. "My daughter is being threatened by one of your subordinates, right here at the supermarket on Main Street. He not only harassed her, but he pulled a gun. We need to deal with this immediately." Robert was stunned for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. "I'll bring the team over right away. Would you like to come along?" "I'll go. She's my daughter. I want to see this through," James said, his voice razor-sharp. No one dared to argue. The mayor's security team was immediately summoned. In less than 5 minutes, a convoy of 3 cars rushed out of the City Hall compound, heading straight for the supermarket. Meanwhile, at the supermarket, Charles Baker was still standing in front of Alyssa, gun dangling in his hand, eyes full of defiance. He smirked, not at all fazed by the worried looks of the people around him. "Who do you think you are? Call whoever you want. I'm a cop, understand? No one can do anything to me," Charles said, his voice full of arrogance. Alyssa stood still, her eyes calm but filled with contempt. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Charles, and you will pay for it." Charles laughed loudly as if he couldn't believe what she said. "Pay? Don't even dream about it. With this uniform, I'm the law here. What do you think a girl like you can do?" But Charles's smile quickly disappeared when a car horn sounded from outside the supermarket. The black convoy with flashing blue lights stopped right in front of the door. The glass doors of the supermarket swung open and James Carter entered, followed by Chief of Police Robert King and a large security detail. The mayor's face was stern and his anger was barely contained. The people around immediately moved aside to make way for them. "What is going on here?" James demanded, each word a command that made everyone in the supermarket hold their breath. Charles, though a little surprised by the group's appearance, tried to keep his composure. He turned around and came face to face with the mayor, but did not immediately recognize him. "I'm on duty," Charles said, trying to keep his voice authoritative. James stepped straight in front of him, his eyes sharp as knives. "Doing a job by threatening a young woman with a gun in her hand. Do you know who she is?" Charles chuckled, but his voice began to shake. I don't care who she is. She caused trouble, and I dealt with it my way. Robert, the sheriff, stepped forward. Put down your weapon, Charles. You've just overstepped your bounds. Charles froze, his eyes filled with worry. I was just doing my job. This is not a job. This is abuse of power and intimidation. You will face the consequences, James said, his voice accusing. Charles froze. His face was white, his eyes scanning the crowd that was looking at him with contempt and anger. James took the phone from the man and watched the video. In the video, everything was clearer than ever. Charles approached Alyssa with a harassing attitude from the beginning, making crude, flirtatious comments. When Alyssa resisted, he immediately changed his attitude, using racist words, blatantly insulting her. The climax was when he pulled out a gun and threatened her, while Alyssa remained calm in front of him. James's face darkened as he handed the phone to Sheriff Robert King. "Look at it," James said, his voice as cold as ice. Robert finished reading, his eyes filled with anger. "Charles, you have seriously violated industry rules. Not only have you abused your power, but you have also broken the law." Charles stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. "I was just trying to keep order. She was being provocative. You can't convict me based on a video." Robert stepped in front of Charles, his voice firm. "Give me your gun and badge now." "What? You can't do that," Charles protested, his eyes filled with panic. "This is an order. You are suspended immediately, pending further investigation. But with what I just saw, you pointed a gun at the mayor's daughter, you idiot. You will never have the chance to become a police officer again." Charles stood there, unable to believe what he had just heard. But under Robert's stern gaze and James's obvious anger, he had no choice but to remove his gun and badge, placing them in Robert's hands. The atmosphere in the supermarket became more tense than ever. The crowd stood watching. No one said anything, but the anger on their faces was unmistakable. James stepped forward, looking straight at Charles, who now looked like a man whose strength had been drained. "Do you think that wearing a police uniform gives you the right to do whatever you want? Do you think that gives you the right to discriminate, to abuse your power, to intimidate people just because of the color of their skin? You are gravely mistaken." He turned to the crowd, his voice booming, as if he wanted everyone here to hear every word. "As mayor of this city, I want to make it clear, no one, no matter what position, should behave like this. I do not tolerate any form of racism in our community, and certainly not in law enforcement." The crowd began to applaud, cheers rising from all sides. James turned to Robert. "Make sure he is fully investigated, and if necessary, refer this matter to higher authorities." Robert nodded. "I will do so, sir." A few days after the supermarket incident, Charles Baker was summoned to the police station to hear the official decision about his job. He entered the building looking haggard. His police uniform had been replaced with casual clothes, but his arrogant appearance still tried to hold on a little. In the small conference room, Chief Robert King sat at the head of the table. He was joined by a group of police department executives and a few attorneys. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, as if everyone was waiting for a verdict. "Charles Baker," Robert began, his voice calm but sharp. "After an internal investigation, the police department has decided to formally dismiss you. Your actions at the supermarket not only violated the code of conduct, but also brought shame to the entire police force." Charles tried to protest, his voice cracking. "I told you, I was just doing my job. It was all blown out of proportion. If it weren't for that girl—" Robert interrupted. "Don't try to blame the victim, Charles. The video, the witnesses, and the evidence clearly show that you were the one who initiated the harassment, threatened with an illegal weapon, and used racial slurs. That's undeniable." Charles looked around the room, searching for a sympathetic look, but everyone turned away. Realizing that there was no more chance, he stood up abruptly, about to leave. But Robert added, "And remember, your case has been turned over to the prosecutor's office. You will face the law." Charles paused, his shoulders slumped. With heavy steps he left the room, carrying with him shame and despair. Immediately after Charles was fired, an official investigation was launched by the prosecutor's office. Video from the supermarket, witness statements, and Charles' past behavior records were included in the case file. The lead prosecutor, a strong woman known for her stance against injustice, quickly filed charges. Charles Baker will be charged with unlawful intimidation with a weapon, abuse of power, and racially motivated harassment, she announced at a press conference. The media quickly picked up the story, and it made national headlines. Articles appeared everywhere, with headlines like, "Police Abuse of Power Faces the Law. Justice for Victims of Racism." Local residents, especially those in the Black community, held peaceful protests, demanding transparency and fairness in the handling of the case. Many carried banners reading, "There is no place for racism in the police force. Protect all, regardless of race." The public not only supported Alyssa, but also honored Mayor James Carter for his tough stance. A month later, Charles Baker's trial began. The courtroom was packed with media, lawyers, and activists. Prosecutors presented evidence, including video footage of the entire incident at the supermarket. The video became irrefutable evidence that Charles used a gun to threaten an unarmed woman without justification. Charles's defense attorney tried to argue that he had acted under work stress and had not meant to cause harm, but this argument was quickly dismissed when the prosecutor emphasized, "Charles Baker not only acted unlawfully, but also abused his power to harass and intimidate his victims. We cannot tolerate this behavior, especially from someone who is supposed to protect the community." Alyssa also appeared in court as a witness. As she took the stand, she showed no fear or anger, but instead calm and determination. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to make sure no one else has to go through what I went through," she said, her voice ringing out strongly. After hours of deliberation, the jury took less than an hour to reach a verdict. Charles Baker was convicted. The judge read the verdict, his voice stern but not without justice. "Charles Baker, you are convicted of unlawful threatening with a weapon. The court sentences you to 2 years in prison. You are also prohibited from holding any position in law enforcement in the future." When he heard the verdict, Charles bowed his head, speechless. Everything he had ever had, his job, his reputation, and his future, was gone. The incident did not end with a verdict. It became a wake-up call for the entire city, even the entire country. The media continued to report, praising the decisive handling of the incident by Mayor James Carter and Police Chief Robert King. Many saw the incident as a testament to the changing way police abuses are handled. Alyssa, despite not wanting to be in the spotlight, has become a symbol of the fight against injustice. She has appeared on several television shows, sharing her story and emphasizing the importance of protecting human rights. "What I want to see," she said in an interview, "is a police force that truly protects everyone, regardless of skin color or gender. I believe we can do that if we all stand up together." The Charles Baker case became a costly lesson, not just for him, but for the entire system. It reminded us that power is not a tool for oppression, and that injustice, no matter how small, should not be ignored. Life went on, but the aftermath of the event left a lasting impression, spurring reforms and community unity. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the whole story. If you like this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories.